You are listening to the We Need to Talk About Oscar podcast, and these are our interviews with co-directors Celine Held and Logan George, plus cinematographer Lowell A. Meyer for Caddo Lake, now available to watch on Max.
I remember one conversation, he called us, and he was like, you did not get that scene.
Yeah.
And we were like, oh my God, you've seen it. We thought we could save it in the edit.
Yeah.
And when time is precious on set, things are evolving and the sun is going down. Like, it's very, very, very helpful, I think, to a director to just have a cinematographer who's behind the camera who's like, you don't have to communicate anything. I know exactly what we need and we're getting it, and like, let's jump right in.
First of all, it's so nice to meet you guys, and thanks for squeezing me into your schedules.
It's so good to meet you.
I like to build conversations like this around certain themes or topics raised by the project at hand and what they end up meaning to me. And this time the ideas of change, contrast, and familiarities have resonated with me the most. Celine, correct me if I'm wrong, but to my knowledge, you don't show up in this one, Caddo Lake, right?
No.
How was being strictly behind the camera after starring in the two of you's debut feature Topside and 2018's highly successful short Caroline as well?
Oh, wow. Thank you for watching our work, our previous work too. It was honestly such a relief. Logan's in our first short films ever, Mouse, and Babs, our other short film. And after that, he was like, no more. And now I totally am on that train too. We both trained in acting. That's how we met at NYU. And I think it's why we're directors, because we love this craft so much. And a big part of that is working with actors. But to just see every frame, to be like that involved in just watching the composition, it felt so much more gratifying to me. And just not nearly as stressful, though very, very stressful. But like, it was the amount of stress was like beyond 100 last time. This time was only at 100.
And how was this for a change for you, Logan? Having Celine behind the camera with you for the entirety of the ride. Did this carry or bring any change for you?
Not really, to be honest, because we collaborate, we've done a lot of shorts together and did a lot of work even before our shorts as like a 2-person camera team. So we have a really like robust way of being able to like communicate with each other on the fly and knowing sort of what we want. We have different things that we're passionate about, maybe within a given scene, but ultimately really respect each other's, aesthetic and opinion. We're really aligned. And that's the goal going into any day of shooting, any production, to sort of be a consistent vision. So it was just nice to sort of always have Celine there. Like we were always able to debate and talk about things and, like build it together. Cause it's super, super hard just being, in front of the camera and you just feel like you're being pulled in 2 different directions it's tricky.
By the way, do you guys see differently the dynamic of the two of you's working relationship?
Oh, no. We're been married for many years now. We have 2 children together. So everything is, personal and professional life we're like at the dinner table with our 2 tiny children. We're like, okay, so for this scene, like it never stopped. And we love it. It's been, and we've, of course, when it stops being like fun, or we will have that conversation, but for right now, we don't ever think it'll stop being fun.
Yeah.
Love that. And you two got to direct, if I'm correct, 3 episodes of M. Night's Servant. And now you wrote and directed a film made under the banner and with the help of his production company, Blinding Edge Pictures, with him as a producer as well. What did his and his company's involvement mean for you personally and for the project itself?
I can't imagine being supported more than we were by Blinding Edge, honestly. Knight read just a version of the script when we were working on Servant. He was like, are you guys, writing a feature or anything? He was like, we have the script. He gave it to him. He read it that weekend. We were like, "You're never going to read this. You're just being nice." He read it that weekend.
So a lesson: always have a script ready.
Yeah, just always
You think them might come on us like, "Do you have a feature?"
always have something
Yes,
to
we
go.
do. It was printed, already made into a book.
With Fortnite in one of the corners.
Just, so supportive of, and, really gave us, like, we were, the directors through and through of this. He was, very much, and this is his first time doing this as a producer. And he fell into that role so well and so gracefully. And he's so articulate in the way that he can explain an idea or like that a problem that's within the script or how to go about solving something. And so him and Blinding Edge, what they did for us during production was like incredible. They basically sat and watched all of our dailies
Every day.
the next day or sometime that night. So they were this sort of like, macro eye sort of watching just the footage coming to them. They came and visited set a few times, but were really able to sort of put voice to like, hey, like maybe like missed something here in this scene.
Or like,
tracking.
did you get that? And
Yeah.
rarely, I remember one conversation, he called us and he was like, you did not get that scene.
Yeah.
And we were like, oh my God, you've seen it. And we thought we could save it in the edit. But
Yeah.
You're
and
right.
like tracking, actors' performances. So that was, so helpful. And he was heavily involved in the edit,
This story in particular, you can't really change. It's so interwoven. Changing something at the end means the beginning changes. All these pieces like line up perfectly.
Yeah.
So in pre-production, it was difficult to really, really work on the script in that way because then everything would fall apart. But we really believe in the 3 lives of a project. And so in post-production, night, we were able to get some reshoots in that we were able to answer some questions that we wish we had seen even before we began shooting. And Knight was so down and so there for that. So I think he's the best.
That's so great to hear. And as for, now that you mentioned parts of the shoot as well, with a big chunk of it taking place on a lake, how was shooting that logistically and everything? I mean, it's one thing to put the actors into the water, but everything else.
Oh no,
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Everything that you need goes out on like a little boat that you maybe have room for 3 to 4 people, plus all the camera equipment. And you're navigating through these winding little paths to, 30 minutes out onto the lake. And so it was really taxing, certain scenes. And even some of the land-based stuff is on like swampland. So you're trudging through mud and churning the dirt up. And we were like in these mud baths by the end of a couple days filming in certain locations. We put the crew and cast through a lot, and they were incredible.
And we had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
We had a really, really good crew and a great crew, who everyone feels like they're respected and people are respecting each other. Then the cast like responds to that. We had a really fun time.
We wore waders probably like 85% of the shoot, because you're just in those kinds of conditions. You don't want to take them off. Yeah.
We did not see an alligator.
Yes. Yeah.
So that, there's a plus.
Yeah, that's a good thing. Well, I wish we could dive just way deeper into this lake, but once again, thank you guys for your time.
Thank you. Great meeting you.
To begin with, how has your collaboration with the directors, Celine and Logan, evolved through multiple shorts and features up until now? Basically, if I'm correct, all of their projects.
Yeah, you're not wrong. That's exactly like the origins of it. We met on a short film. I met Logan first on a short film that he was acting in that I was shooting. And it's just one of these rare examples where a DP and actor like sort of bond on a shoot. I was also operating, so I was just kind of close to him, and it was like a 5-day short, and it was just one of those. Everybody's wearing every hat, and he's staying with the director, which is the set, like the place where we were filming. So it was just a very collaborative atmosphere, and we quickly realized that we had a shared enthusiasm and sensibility. And so when it was his turn to direct with his now wife, Celine, they made a short together and decided to hire me. And that went really well. And then we immediately went into production on another one. It was really funny. We did these 2 shorts back to back without them even editing the first. And those went great and we loved it. And then the next year we did 3 shorts without them even editing the first 2. And yeah, we just, over the course of that process, I felt like I had, maybe a little bit more experience behind the camera. So I felt the need to sort of show, here's what a zoom lens does. Should we try dolly? Like, what's the aesthetic? Like, what do we want to do? And it sort of felt, not that I know much more than them at this point or much more about cinema than them, but like, we quickly discovered a language together and, would try one sort of tool set in one short and one sort of tool set in another short. But the short film we made called Caroline really just fired on all cylinders, really just zoned us in to like, it just felt like we really hit the sweet spot with like how the camera worked, how it shaped the performances, how the camera just reacted to performances, the constraints that we gave ourselves and the time that we afforded ourselves for each take. Yeah, it just felt like, oh, this is the thing that we're really trying to achieve. And it really worked. And we felt like we made something really special. And so when they were ready to make their first feature, which it wasn't too dissimilar from Caroline in story and in tone. It felt like, oh, okay, that camera aesthetic dogma that we like literally wrote down. Like I wrote down, okay, we shot at this T-stop, we shot with these lenses. This was the type of, like we had a expression that once you hit the red button on the camera, it's a documentary. It's no longer like a movie. And you keep rolling and you don't let the character out of frame and you're tethered to them in this handheld dynamic. Like these were all things that we kind of tracked in those 2 years of like kind of developing a language. And so when we went and made their first feature Topside, that was like the groundwork had really been laid in and we felt really like in the pocket. And then that kind of, you learn from everything you do. So this movie Caddo Lake that we made together, it shares a lot of similar aesthetics and tools and sensibilities as Topside, but we kept kind of iterating. We used a slightly bigger sensor and different lenses, but always trying to achieve the same goal, which is like a character-driven story where the camera is always reactive. It's never anticipatory. It's never ahead of the audience. It's never ahead of the characters. It's always experiencing the world with them and seeing it through their like individual character's perspective.
Sounds amazing. And it totally comes across as that. So
awesome.
Wonderful. And the film Caddo Lake is produced by M. Night Shyamalan. Having worked with Night before, when you read the script, did you get a sense of what might have attracted him to the project?
Yeah. I mean, I think first and foremost, like just like how I got involved, like what attracted me was Celine and Logan, their enthusiasm, their drive, their like unbelievable work ethic, passion, organization, clear-sightedness, leadership abilities. I think they're pretty intoxicating to be around. Like their energy is really, really just makes everyone on the crew feel really respected and included in the process. And so I think just like how they brought me into the fold, like I think Knight also saw, he hired them for his TV show. So I think he already saw they had vision. And then once he got to know them and read their script, I think he just was like, yeah, this is a no-brainer. These two are the future, them and Lowell and Kara and everything they're doing together. I think he just wanted to be a part and be supportive and see where that journey took him and them. And so I also think like story-wise, he's someone whose films often revolve around families and their faith and like what their belief is going to push them to do and to question. And so I think there's some elements of that in Caddo for sure, like a sci-fi story that's based around a family and like, can you believe this supernatural thing? And if you can, then how does that change the way you see your family in the world?
I believe exactly a week ago, I talked to Celine and Logan and they told me about how supportive Night was. What I don't know is how much his, stylistic choices or general vision would have affected the production. So Did you have to think of blending Celine and Logan's own voice with that, or how did this process unfold throughout pre, in, and post-production?
I think it's very fair to say that like Knight's role in the movie was very much like, he was like a mentorship perspective, and a producer, someone who's like looking out for the best interests of the project. But I wouldn't say most producers, come in and say, this is the way you're going to shoot it. This is how I like to make movies. It wasn't like that. Just because Knight is a director, I think he was able to like separate his creative stylings and directorial stylings and just, I don't know, likes and dislikes or something. I think he was able to kind of keep those things at bay and let Celine and Logan and me and everyone else involved like kind of do their thing, like very much on Servant. I think it was a similar idea where like Celine Logan and I would often look around the set of Servant and be like, man, did someone just like give us the keys to a really expensive car and just let us drive it around the parking lot as much as we want? It sort of felt like that at times. And then he'd check in with us and go, hey, how's it going? I watched the dailies and I really liked what you did here. Or, oh, we might want to consider getting a pickup here or something, but he was never, I think if you watch Caddo Lake, it is very different from an M. Night Shyamalan directed movie, especially speaking as someone who has lensed an M. Night Shyamalan movie. Like, I shot Knock at the Cabin after I shot Caddo Lake, and they're two very, very different processes and looks and modus operandi. Like everything about it is pretty different, I would say. So like, I think Knight was really helpful in like trying to help the story and get Celine and Logan what they needed. But I wouldn't say he was, trying to tell them how to shoot a scene necessarily.
Sounds more than ideal, to be honest.
I think that is a really good producer in a way too. Like, I think he was really trusting and, just focused on the important thing as a producer, which is like the story and the performances and, okay, is that scene complete? Is this going to tell the story the way when he read it? That sort of thing.
Yeah. If I were to say that you are a DP who likes or prefers to operate his camera, would that be a reach or rather quite correct?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, especially like this is a good example. Like with Celine and Logan, I operate like every shot, unless we have a B camera or something. I feel very happy as an operator. I feel very connected to what's going on. I feel like I can only help, craft the story. I feel like I can be that much more immediate with them as directors, and I can help, take their notes and immediately implement them without having to sort of sift that through someone else I just, I really like being in that position because it's a position of extreme trust and extreme collaboration. And there's obviously a time and place to not operate if, I don't know, there's some big explosion or techno crane or lots of cameras or something. Like sometimes you need a bird's eye view as a DP, but I think the majority of time, 9 times out of 10, that's like where I want to be, assuming that's how the director I'm working with also feels. And I think in the case of Celine and Logan, they want nothing more than for me to operate, the camera on all their movies moving forward, because I think that's part of our like secret sauce as filmmakers is like, I'm behind the camera. They're right next to me with their handheld monitors. They're also very engaged, very in the action. And so we become this like 3-headed little monster, just running around the set with a camera.
I'm trying not to imagine that.
It's a funny image. And it's like, I think we become kind of like, we become just like kids, a little bit like making a movie for the first time. There's like a giddiness and an excitement and an engagement and just like an immediacy to everything because, that's just, I think, the way they work best and we work best.
And the way to avoid burning out or something like that.
Totally. Yeah, I think it gives you an immediate access to like a performance. And I think part of it too is that it's handheld, you know, it's a type of operating that requires an extreme amount of insight, of being able to read a performance, being able to adjust on the fly, whether that's while you're rolling or if something's not working in between cut and roll. But yeah, you know, there's a lot that happens when you're handheld, like anything can happen. And so it requires, I think, an operator and an eye behind the camera that's just very dialed in. And it helps because a lot of times hired operators are just coming in for the day. They don't know all the prep work, all the planning, all the research, you know, why this shot is being captured this way. Why is there only one shot in the scene? Why are there five? Why are there blah, 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 you know? And so like being clued into all that stuff just makes you that much more engaged and ready to capture the part of the shot that you're trying to capture. What is the emotion you're trying to get out of the shot? What is the information you're trying to communicate in the shot? That can be a lot to unpack. And when time is precious on set, things are evolving and the sun is going down. Like it's very, very, very helpful, I think, to a director to just have a cinematographer who's behind the camera who's like, you don't have to communicate anything. I know exactly what we need and we're getting it. And like, let's jump right in.
Was you not operating the camera ever considered, even as a plan B or such?
It's a must. It's like a non-negotiable. And so,
Amazing.
yeah, I don't know what would happen if I like broke my leg or something, you know, it would be like stop the entire machine. Knock on wood that never happened.
Yeah, certainly. And still staying with operating the camera, did the idea of shooting on a lake prove to be an additional logistical hurdle in this matter, or rather held by, I don't know, maybe sparing the number of people and equipment needed on the water or anything like that?
That's a really, really astute observation. Yes. Like, you know, if you watch this movie, you know that a lot of it takes place on the water, on boats, on moving boats, on static boats, literally in the water, treading around. So like, yeah, there was a limited number of people we could bring on boats. There are many shots where it's just me and the actor on a boat and it's just us. And like, and boat work is like car work, but even harder because you can't get out of the car. You can't just like open the car door and go stretch your legs. Like you are stuck on that boat. And if you need a battery and you don't have one, then you have to have someone bring it to you. Like it's a whole thing. So yeah, from that respect, like it was a very practical and pragmatic way of working as a crew to just have me doing that as much as possible. Yeah. So yeah, it was a consideration, and I think it's part of the reason why the movie exists and was able to be made in the amount of days and for the amount of time it was. And yeah, I just think at this point, you know, for the like 7 or 8 or 9 things we've made together or more, you know, we just have this system dialed in, and it's just continued to prove to be beneficial.
Yeah, and another thing is that how on the water, out in the open, like you have zero power over the light, right?
Yes, for the most part. I mean, what you have control over in that kind of situation is, okay, what direction are you planning on facing? What time of day will give you the most flattering light? And, you know, hopefully the weather gives you the light you're hoping for, be it overcast or direct or whatever. But like, yeah, I think this movie, it taught me a lot as a cinematographer, and it was sort of like a continuation of what we've done in the past, which is like sometimes we have big lighting setups and big scenes and big car chases, and other times it's just us in the woods and there's not much besides like maybe a bounce board or, you know, a floppy for negative fill or something. Like there are just some times where you don't need a lot of tools or can't have access to them, and you have to try to plan your day the best you can accordingly to help yourselves get the best light. But yeah, there are other times it's just like, this is the way the schedule fell. It's really hard to get to this place with lunch. You have to break at a certain time. You know, there are times where you just hope that, okay, this one little 1/8 of a page scene that had to fall at high noon, hopefully that's not going to be too bad. Or maybe if we're in the canopy of the trees, it's going to be okay. And so, you know, it was a real relinquishing of control. And it taught me a lot as a DP of just like, you can get away with a lot sometimes, but you just also have to be comfortable with the idea that like, okay, if it's overcast to day, then we're just gonna make it work, or vice versa. If it's bright sun and it's never going away, then okay, we just have to find the angles and make it work, or wait for the right time of day and shoot it all in an hour. We did that for this sunset scene where we just jammed everything through in an hour. You just try to play to the strengths of what you have, and the strengths of what you have when you relinquish all that control is usually speed. If you're not setting up a lot of lights, if you're not bringing a lot of crew, then you can actually probably jam pretty quickly. And so maybe if you time it right, you can get your 5 shots in that beautiful magic hour window. Or we would do other things like if we knew there was a storm, there's a storm at the end of the movie. And so you have to have overcast, dim lighting. And we were shooting this one scene that takes place in the middle of a highway overpass where you have nothing to shade you if you have a sunny day. So we planned certain beats where we shot dusk for stormy weather. Because it's like, okay, well, maybe there's a hot spot in the sky where the sun is going down. But if you don't really look at that and you're kind of favored toward the opposite side of the sky, and you replace the sky with clouds, if you put VFX on clouds in, like that kind of can play. Like the actors will look like they're in kind of an overcast shaded light. So, you have to kind of find tricks and figure out what you can get away with, what you can push the limits of, and help yourself when things don't go right. You try to help correct it in the color grade and try to negotiate a little bit with what can you pull the pink of the sunset out and make it look grayer and make it look like clouds, that sort of thing.
By the way, where did the lake segments fall within the order of the shoot?
The underwater stuff was like the last 2 days of the shoot. And then the stuff where we were on water, probably, I think it was like day 8. We had a big water day. And then the first 2 weeks of the shoot, we shot at the like family house, the main home in the movie for Eliza's character. And so she has a real dock right outside her house. And there's a lot of scenes where she pulls up, like in most scripts, it would be like character drives home and drives into the driveway. But we had boats and they were boating. They boat everywhere. And so like we would chip away at boat stuff at the beginning. Like I think on day 1, the last hour of the day, and a lot of time we were trying to do it near dusk, near sunset, get pretty light reflecting off the water. And so we started just chipping away at it very early on, just to kind of, like, no pun intended, get our feet wet. And we figured out, okay, here's the amount of crew we really need on the director boat. And then here's the crew we need on the supplementary boat. And then here's the crew we need on the actor boat. Here's how, like we'd have to do sometimes you'd tether the picture boat to the filming boat so that you could get like process trailer side angle views where you're really locked in. So, we dialed in a few things over the first like 7 days. And then on day 8, we did this big, every crew member gets on a boat and we're just filming, driving stuff in a certain part. And then we did maybe another couple days like that where we went out into like little islands and would film. But yeah, there was just a lot of boat work. There's a lot of boats and people boating around in various different boats throughout the film. So, it never really went away. It was just always something. It was just, there were some big days and there were some little days, but every day had a little bit of like water, pretty much.
The reason for me asking is the thought of when you're dealing with such a challenging aspect of the shoot that takes up a significant portion of the project, how do you maintain focus during the other scenes? Because even though they might be physically or logistically less demanding, they are just as crucial to the story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a fair question to ask any filmmaker, because you can have the biggest budget, coolest action thriller thing ever, but at the end of the day, you're going to just have a scene that's probably 2 people talking in a room, and that's what separates a lot of AMs from pros as directors, and also reveals a lot about a director, is like, how do you cover 2 people talking in a room when there's like nothing else to hide behind? And so, I do think that's something that we cared a lot about. I think obviously we want there to be cool spectacle and scope and lake shots and drone shots and all this stuff, but like no movie works unless you care about the characters, unless you're learning about them, unless you feel their pain or love or fear or anxiety or whatever. And so, yeah, I think the way a lot of that was handled is, we drill down and we spend a lot of time in coverage, and they do a lot of takes. Celine and Logan were actors first before they were writers and directors. So I think they know how to work with actors. They really care about performances. I think it's one of the strongest parts of the film is like the performances they got from their actors. And so as much as they are like filmmakers who love action and anxiety-inducing, thrilling shots, they really do care. And so I think they often keep those scenes simply covered so that they can really focus on like, okay, did we get this person's performance in their close-up? Did we get the opposite close-up on the other person? And like, yeah, sometimes it's covered in a oneer depending on the length of the scene. But I think for the most part, they're not atypical in that, if they want to get a close on someone and a close on the other person and dive into every version of that performance, every, speed, every nuance, and work with the actors to feel good and shape it and feel like they're not leaving anything, no stone unturned.
And on the other hand, but somewhat in the same ballpark, keeping the different timelines hidden for a while or somewhat in the shadows, followed by slow reveal in the case of Caddo Lake, must have been one of the biggest challenges from a storytelling standpoint. Needless to say, credit goes to the writing, directing, editing, and acting, but also to cinematography, because you had to ensure every subtle detail the audience needed to notice or pick up on was and then kept in the frame while keeping every scene, from the most dynamic on the lake to the stillest, most intimate close-ups, and keeping all this coherent and equally captivating. Is this something you ever think of, or do you rather just focus on the day, the current scene, the current shot?
No, I think any good cinematographer, is thinking holistically. Like, you obviously are going to get into the weeds when it comes to, how do you shoot a scene? What's the emotion of the scene? What's the lighting? What's the color palette? But like, I think it's wise for anybody to think holistically and think, okay, how does this movie want to be shot? How does the story want to be told? What are the foundational decisions we need to make as a team before we dive into the weeds? And so I think one of those decisions from a writing standpoint and from a look standpoint was that, until you experience the sort of sci-fi elements in the movie, like, we wanted it to feel just extremely grounded, and even with those sci-fi elements grounded. And I think that's pretty on brand with what we've done in the past, that everything feels grounded, nothing feels super stylistic or flashy or overlit or something. So that was like a non-negotiable from the get-go, just like that we're keeping our grounded aesthetic and certain tools that we've used. But without giving too much away, there are two storylines in the movie, and we wanted both of those storylines to feel extremely connected and extremely similar. And we didn't want it to be like, okay, one is shot with one set of lenses, one is shot with the other, or one is a cool palette and one is a warm palette. We wanted these people to both just feel like they were experiencing the same day, maybe, so, and that's where some of the script stuff comes in, where a lot of the stuff in the movie, it's like the first day narratively with Eliza cuts back and forth with the first day of Dylan. And when she goes to bed, he goes to bed. And when she wakes up, he wakes up. And like, there's just a lot of already interwoven story that is subconsciously making the audience think these people are like in the same town, doing the same thing at the same time. And so, it was very important from a camera standpoint to treat it as such and not kind of treat them any differently from a camera or lighting perspective. And then even from there, after the story goes on and you realize what's going on, it's still the same aesthetic, I think at the risk of sounding like we're, I don't know, boring, non-stylized filmmakers, because I don't think that's true. I think there is a lot of like little flourishes in the movie stylistically, and there's cool one-ers and all these things. Like there's a lot about our approach that is trying not to call attention to itself. I think it's one of those things where the last thing I want to hear after someone watches the movie is like, oh my God, the cinematography and that shot you did. And, like it sometimes means to me like, oh, you just cared about the cinematography, you weren't engaged in the story, or, my cinematography didn't just make you focus on the performance. Like, I think that's what we're always trying to achieve, is like put the spotlight on the movie, the setting, and not like the filmmaking aesthetic or the filmmaking process or what I'm doing personally. So, I think, like I said earlier, when we hit the red button, it's a documentary. I think that informs a lot of our aesthetic, where we're trying to use the same lens. We're trying to just like use that 50 mil human eye perspective and not just cut to like a wacky 18 mil in a car and like, look how wide and bulbous everything is. Like we're always going for like very rectilinear lines. We're going for, okay, if we want a wide, well then just take the 50 and walk back. If you want a close up, take the 50 and walk close. There's something about even the switching of big distances in focal length from an 18 to a 200 that feels like the cinematographer's hand guiding the audience and telling you what to feel. And it's like, I don't know, I don't think we went wider than a 35 ever. And I don't think we went tighter than a like 135. And that was on a really rare occasion where like you had to get someone's POV where you feel focused in, because that still feels somehow grounded to how humans see the world. Whereas like, I don't think any human sees the world with like an 18 mil lens. So maybe that answers your question, but like, yeah, we're just always striving for like cohesion, everything feeling grounded, everything feeling like of the world we all know and love, because then you might sink deeper into the story and not be like pulled out by something stylistic or wacky or uncanny.
Love this approach. As we wrap up, I noticed on IMDb that you're currently shooting a film titled Tuner, directed by Meyer.Lowell, starring Dustin Hoffman and Leo.
Wow, I can't believe that's on my IMDb already.
It is.
We just wrapped day 4, so I'm like, what? It's crazy.
From what I understand, this is Daniel's narrative feature debut, though he's an experienced documentary filmmaker, having won an Oscar for Navalny just last year. Based on my research, you've also worked on a documentary, It Ain't Over. So you've got some experience in that area. While I know you can't reveal too much about the project, how have you been able to apply your experience in narrative filmmaking to this kind of situation? And from your perspective, how has the transition into narrative filmmaking been for Daniel?
Yeah, I think there's something I think about a lot, which is this funny phrase, which is like someone told me once, which is that all documentarians want their documentaries to look like cinematic narratives, and all cinematic filmmakers want their movies to look and feel like documentaries. And I think, I don't know, in some ways that's kind of true with Celine and Logan and Caddo Lake. And it feels, obviously there is cinema, but what I've been talking about is this like documentary sort of approach to handheld and always rolling and all that stuff. With Daniel, yeah, I mean, he is someone who has made incredible inroads as a documentarian. He's really, really, really good at it. He's a really smart filmmaker, but I think he, like most filmmakers, grew up watching cool movies like Back to the Future and, all these and Christopher Nolan movies and all these movies that are very cinematic and inspiring and get you to want to make movies. And so I think he followed that doc path, and it feels like he's reached, an apex in a lot of ways. And so he was ready to make a narrative. And so we met on this doc and we instantly bonded and got along and saw, very similar, creative things in each other. And so, yeah, it's been awesome. It's been a really, really, really fun movie process so far. And yeah, I've been really enjoying it. And I think, I guess one overlap is, I've noticed that directors are trying to get a performance in a thing out of someone. And in doc, that's like, okay, I'm having a conversation with you and you're not trying to get them to say something, but you are trying to get maybe someone's stiff and they're not giving you a good interview and they're not talking very much or they're not emoting. And, you might poke and prod them and get them to loosen up or help them find their voice a little bit and give you better answers that will then make better scenes or better whatever. And I think that's similar for directors on a set with working with an actor. It's just, okay, that actor has a script, but like they need to loosen up. They need to show me different shades of themselves. And, and so you're always massaging a performance in that respect when you have a camera and you have a subject. It's just, is it a real subject who doesn't have a script? Is it a scripted person? So in that respect, I think there is overlap. And yeah, I think when it comes to my work, I think I'm just always trying to capture reality. And that's something you still have to do in doc. Like everything in a doc is a construction still. You're still choosing things when you choose the focal length you're going to use, when you choose the angle you're going to shoot from, when you choose how to frame the subject, and all those choices give an audience an impression of the person in front of the camera and an impression of the moment you're watching and the feeling of that moment. So yeah, I think it's maybe something that I'm simplifying a lot, but it's just something that is very clear to me that every time you frame something, you're telling the audience, like if you shoot someone from 3/4 behind and you're just barely seeing their eye, there's a little bit of mystery to that person. You don't know what they're thinking. You don't know who they are fully. If someone's looking right down the barrel of the lens, maybe they're more connected to you. Maybe you feel like you're really seeing them. So, it's one of those things. You can do that in doc, you can do that in narrative, and that will alter your experience as a viewer with the subject in front of the camera.
Lowell, thank you so much for taking the time. I love talking to you and I can't wait to see Tuner and any future project of yours.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. Thank you for having me. This was a great conversation, and best of luck. Thank you again for having me. Like, you're very easy to talk to and ask good questions.